Matt, are you making the presentation?
I'll kick it off, Chair Duffy, and I'm going to turn it over to Nick Voris. And
Okay,
Wendy
very good.
will be presenting.
All right.
Would you like me to begin?
No, we'll
Okay.
let you know. We'll introduce you.
Sounds good.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. I call to order the work study for Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. This is in the matter of 21 EKME 320 TAR. And this is Evergy's EV status update. I'm Susan Duffy. I serve as chair for the commission. I'm joined by Commissioner French, and I do believe Commissioner Keene will be joining us in a little bit. I appreciate everyone being here. I see a member of Evergy's work team, and I note that staff is here. And this is a status update. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Doherty. And I imagine we'll be able to ask questions, Commissioner French, as well as staff. So Matt, if you will lead us off, I would appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Chair Duffy, and good morning to you and Commissioner French and Commissioner Keene. We appreciate you giving us some time this morning to provide the status update on the EV programs that were approved in docket 21 EKME 320 TAR per the December 2021 order. And if I may introduce myself this morning for those out there, Matt Doherty I'm a Director of Regulatory Affairs with Evergy. And today I have with me from our team, our presenters, Nick Voris, who is our Senior Manager of Electrification Products and Services. And presenting along with Nick will be Wendy Marine, our Lead Product Manager as part of the electrification team. And I also want to mention on the call today with me is Kim Winslow, our Senior Director of the Energy Solutions Group, and Lana McDonald, who works with me in regulatory as our Kansas Regulatory Affairs Manager. So with that, Nick, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Let's begin with a little bit of a tech check. Can you hear me and can you see the slides, Matt?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Great. Thank you. And thank you for having us this morning. Again, my name is Nick Boris, and I manage Evergy's electrification team. We will begin today with a safety moment, as is Evergy custom. Our framework for you guys today is it includes three primary parts. One is that we want to talk about our transportation electrification program, where it sits in space within our overall efforts to manage the grid as the transportation electrification sector electrifies. Then we'll turn from kind of that macro discussion to a more granular discussion of results to date. And lastly, we will talk about three contemporary issues. We thought that since we had an audience with you this morning, we would bring to you three issues that are related to transportation electrification that we think, one, would be interesting to the commission, to other folks who are tuned in, but also these are issues that you are likely to hear more about going forward. And then we'll wrap up today by providing briefly just some of the milestones for the next year between now and the time that we come back to commission to talk about the results from program year 2. Our safety moment today is informed by the fact that we were at the height of swim season in these parts, right? And we're thinking that it's hard to overestimate the readiness of children, particularly young children, for swim lessons. So we just wanted to encourage folks. A lot of us have littles either in our families or in our social spheres, and we just want to encourage folks to start kids in lessons as early as possible, because it's just really amazing what children are able to do in the water, certainly as babies, but then as toddlers, they can become very proficient swimmers as toddlers, which of course makes their experiences around water so much safer. We'll begin our high-level discussion this morning by talking about what's happening on the supply side and the demand side with respect to electric vehicles. We'll begin on the supply side. And what this slide shows, the left-hand side, is the amount of investment that automakers have announced in the United States. We're looking at over $200 billion worth of investments aimed at electric vehicles by the automakers. And it's not just talk. Of that $200 billion, over half of it has been allocated. So for example, GM might announce, we're going to spend $30 billion on EVs by 2030. That $30 billion would be part of the announced investment shown on this chart. But then they might go further and say, $5 billion of that is going to be at a new battery plant in Kingsport, Tennessee. Well, that $5 billion, those are dollars that have a name on them. So those dollars would be represented in the green curve that shows the amount of the announced investment that has been specifically allocated. These investments are the result of a number of signals. The automakers are responding to demand. The demand, and part of the demand story is shown on the right-hand side of this slide. This is the number of EVs that are in Evergy's service territory. You can see we're knocking on the door of 20,000 in our service territory. A little over half of those are in our Evergy Kansas Central, Evergy Kansas Metro. We're looking at that population to double every 2 years for most of the rest of this decade, which will put us at about 100,000 vehicles by 2030. So demand is clearly a signal that is spurring some of these investments by automakers. But also we have sustainability efforts, and of course, probably the highest profile sustainability effort that I could highlight is Amazon's, because they run commercials about it, right? But also we have a number of companies that are doing it in kind of a less high profile way. And lastly is federal support. We know that over the past 18 months or so, there's been a significant amount of federal support that is aimed at electric vehicles. And how we think of it is that at this point, the federal support is providing incentives throughout the entirety of the EV supply chain, from lithium mine to driveway, quite literally. Turning now to a more kind of Evergy-centric perspective, we view our TE program within the context of our overall efforts to manage the grid. And what the left-hand side of this slide shows is what we don't want to happen. This is where we have folks come home at night. They all come home, between 5 and 6, or the majority of them do. They plug in their cars and they start charging, and we end up with this large maroon hump of load. So Evergy and our peer utilities are aimed at encouraging folks to charge during times that are much more grid friendly. That way, this new load can be beneficial to all of our customers. Last year, I came across a paper, and it provided a framework for utilities who are preparing their grids for EVs. And what this framework did, and now I'm talking about the right-hand side of this slide, is it broke down activities in terms of 6 categories, the 6 categories that you see on this slide. And basically, the summary of this paper is that utilities need to be working in these 6 areas, because in the aggregate, these 6 areas define what it means to prepare your grid for EV adoption, to have an EV-ready grid. So what we did on the next slide is we took those 6 categories of activities and we started mapping current and future Evergy initiatives to those activities. Moreover, we drew a red circle around those initiatives that comprise EV's transportation electrification program. So you see commercial EV TOU rates, you see our residential program show up within those red bubbles. And a couple of takeaways that I hope we have from this morning is that, one, Evergy is very active in terms of preparing our grid for an increasingly electrified future, but also the components of our transportation electrification program play a vital role in that preparation. These programs are very important to us operationally. The last slide for this segment of the presentation just provides an overview of our TE program components, and I'll run through it left to right fairly quickly. First is we have our commercial charging rebate, and that rebate is available to non-utility entities who are looking to build, own, and operate their own charging stations. The amount of the rebate that is available to our customers depends on the type of charging that they are installing and also the use case for that charging site. I would also add that eligibility is dependent on the customer agreeing to things like sharing data and providing charging stations that are demand response capable, which ties us back to the role of this rebate in helping us manage our grid for an increasingly electrified future. Secondly is the residential rebate, and that rebate is for customers that have EVs and they are looking to install level 2 charging at their home. So getting them from level 1 charging, 120 volt charging, just a standard outlet, to 240 volt charging. And what that does is it decreases the amount of time they need to charge by about 80%. We provide 2 levels of rebate. We provide a higher level of rebate if the customer is on a TOU rate, to provide them that greater incentive to go on a TOU rate, and then the lesser amount if they are not on a TOU rate. Speaking of TOU rates, that's kind of the third leg of this stool. We have the business EV and the transit EV rate that were part of our filing in 2021. Also, we included our residential rates in this slide, not because they were created by our 2021 filing, but because they help kind of round out our story in terms of the TOU rates that we offer our customers that are specific, that are incentivize customers to charge off peak. And with that, I will pause for questions before we pivot towards a more granular conversation about results to date.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation so far, and I would invite staff to ask questions at this time, but I do have 2 questions. One, with the folks sharing data, that is a requirement. Your data that you're getting is aggregated, right? Names, personal information is left out, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Secondly, on your time of use rates, and I note your double asterisk that these precede Evergy's program here, TE program. Do you anticipate any modification of your time of use rates because of TE that would further enhance the viability of time of use?
Yeah, I would say that there is certainly going to be an opportunity in the future to modify and add new TOU rates in the residential space that more effectively address EV owners. Absolutely.
Yes, because I think other states have adopted some more, I don't want to say sophisticated, but to recognize those with electric vehicles. So thank you. And I will turn to Commissioner French and then staff for any questions at this point.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got a couple observations on these slides and maybe a couple questions. First observation, I think I'd call it, is if you could go back to slide, I think it was 6, on the investment that you're seeing. And you know, I'll admit, I think most of us found this pretty compelling a few years ago when we started to see the large announced investments in manufacturing of electric vehicle models for the future. I just wanted to say that another data point I've seen in recent presentations is it's paired with the investment in electric vehicles, but we're now seeing a trend in announced disinvestment or phase out of investment in internal combustion engines for the future, which means 10 years from now, you may not see a new model of your favorite internal combustion car every year. It may be every few years, or there may just be no new models coming out. And to me, that's a pretty compelling data point that the transition's coming. And so I was just wondering if you had seen some of that same data and expect the same trend.
Yeah, I would say we're aware of it. There's another version of this slide that replaces that left-hand graph with bubbles that show kind of all the OEMs and what their dates are, the dates that they've announced for which they will stop producing combustion engine vehicles. So we're definitely aware of it. I'll avoid editorializing a bit, but when I see, you know, dates like 2030 and 2035, and I think about where we live, there's no small amount of skepticism on my part, but we're all going to find out together, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm certainly not editorializing anyway. My point is the data is the data, and
Yeah.
it makes it more real that this may be coming. Maybe not on the timeline that some think, but that it is coming. The next observation I wanted to make is on your next slide.
Sure.
Actually, your next couple slides, but this is as good as any. And I just want to say I am pleased to see that, the first thing you're talking about here is load management. There was a recent report that came out of NARUC, the National Regulators Trade Association, and essentially the breakdown was, what's going to be the impact on customers and shareholders, and it all comes down to whether we manage this new load. If we don't manage it, it's going to have an upward pressure on rates for customers. If we do manage it, it can put downward pressure on rates. And I guess I just want to urge you all to be as proactive as possible. And this dovetails with some of Chair Duffy's comments that we have not been probably as proactive on mandatory type time of use rates or dynamic rates or anything like that. And I know that is unpopular. I mean, we're certainly seeing that play out in the media as they discuss some new rates going into effect across the state line in Missouri. But at least as it pertains to EVs, I think I'm glad to hear you all talk about it, but I would certainly just urge you to stay ahead of it. That, we shouldn't wait until we have a problem, that we should be trying to develop those rates and implement them. And I also think you all know this because of what's going on in Missouri, but education early on is going to just be absolutely vital to make sure folks understand why we're asking them to move to these rate structures, and that we're not asking them to move to the rate structure so that we can raise prices or collect more money, but rather to save customers money. So I think that's more of an editorial comment than anything, but I just wanted to drive home how important I think this managed charging piece is, because it's the break point on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing for customers. So I think that's my only comment there. I'm checking to see whether I have anything else specific. Do you have anything in the works? I think this is kind of Chair Duffy's question, but is there anything either in our rate case or in a future tariff filing that's coming up on time of use rates, perhaps geared toward this?
Yeah, I would say we'll be, revisiting our existing time of use rates in future rate cases, just kind of as a matter of course, right? But I would point us towards about 6 or 7 slides from now. We're providing you with a glimpse of what utilities and industry increasingly believe is the next step, kind of the next step beyond TOU rates in determining when folks charge, particularly in the residential space. And we don't have, just not to give away, what we say on that slide, but we don't have a specific timeline for approaching commission with a proposal for an Evergy program. But we believe, as I sit here, that is very much going to be part of our story going forward. I just can't tell you if it's a next year story or a 2 years from now story, right?
Very good. Yeah. I mean, my only thought is we need to stay proactive, but I'll let you wait till we get to the slide.
You bet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. I would turn to our staff. Do you have questions at this point in time? Okay, not hearing anything. Okay, please continue.
Okay, well, I'm going to continue by stop talking and handing over to Wendy Marine. So Wendy.
Very good. Can everybody hear me?
Sound good?
Fantastic. Well, good morning and thank you for having us. So I'm going to start off by talking about the residential EV outlet rebate that was approved back in 2021. Going very well. Customers seem to really appreciate that we are offering them an incentive to help offset some of their costs for installing level 2 charging. So just as a reminder, the objective of that program was to enable the use of level 2 charging at home, either via a NEMA 1450 outlet with a 40 amp circuit or hardwiring their EV charger back to that circuit in the breaker. We want to also make sure we're educating our customers on the benefits of off-peak charging. So whether or not they've elected to take that time of use rate or not, we want to continue to put in front of them the benefits of charging off-peak and scheduling their vehicle to charge overnight. And as Nick has said a couple of times, this is a precursor to active managed charging as we continue to watch what the market is doing, other utilities around the country, and our own impacts to our grid as we look at different technologies and ways we could do that managed charging in the future and what that timeline will look like for us. So just a couple of highlights. As we mentioned, time of use is an option for these customers. I was pleasantly pleased and unexpectedly surprised that quite a few customers did elect to go on the time of use rate. So we did see a pretty good uptick in both Kansas Metro and Kansas Central, as you'll see from the graphs in the top right-hand corner. We also have an ongoing online campaign to help influence that charging behavior. As you can see, a couple of examples of our online ads for scheduling the vehicle to charge overnight and then reminding them about the $500 rebate for that faster home electric charging. So we put that $500 out in front of them. We don't offer that $250 option, right? So we're hoping that they'll see $500 and opt into that time of use rate at the time that they're applying for the rebate. Any questions about the residential rebate before I move on to commercial?
Just real quick, Wendy, in terms of the conversion to a time of use rate, so you're saying when you receive notice that a resident now has purchased a electric vehicle, that you're seeing the switch at that time? Is that how I'm understanding the bullet?
So there is education online as they go to our website to look for incentives. They do see that there is an incentive available for them to upgrade their outlet to level 2. What we've done on the back end is if they do apply and they do not have a time of use rate, when we notify them that we've received their application, we let them know a second time that if they were to change to a time of use rate, they can increase their rebate incentive to $500. So we are giving them a window of time to make that change. Because I can't just leave it open for 6 months and then pay them $500. So we give them a small window of time to make that change, and then we validate that that change was made and we pay them out $500.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, moving on. Oop, too many slides. There you go. Commercial EV charger rebate. This program has had a slower start than expected from the time that this was approved. So just as a reminder for the program objectives, again, we wanted to grow access to level 2 charging throughout our service territory, as well as DC fast charging. We really wanted to focus on those end use cases where there's limited infrastructure today, particularly at multifamily dwelling and workplace. We want to collect and analyze that charger utilization data and better understanding potential impacts to our grid, as well as expand our demand response capabilities to our public charging. So one of the reasons we believe that we've had the slower uptake in year one is because from talking to our customers, everybody was sitting back waiting to hear what all the federal funding announcements were going to be and tax credit availability. So since those announcements have been made, we're having a lot more conversations with customers who are now more intrigued about what does that mean for me with federal funding, tax credits, and incentives available from Evergy. So we do believe that we're going to see a higher take rate on applications for pre-approval in 2023. And then it does take time for them to actually build their projects. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that we've actually had 5 charging stations put in service to date. Those were 3 DC fast chargers and 4 level 2 chargers over 6 sites. but you can see that the number of applications that have been pre-approved has grown, is pretty significant. So we do anticipate that to continue to grow. And then the bottom is just another example of the digital advertising that folks are seeing online as they're looking for incentives from Evergy. They will see that there is a rebate available from us as well.
So Wendy, are you guys hitting the chamber circuit, you know, as they have their lunches and the, you know, realtors get together? Are you making presentations or have a table or providing some information at that point?
So we are doing some local events. We have not actually physically hit the chambers that I'm aware. We are continuing to develop out those plans. We have done some pretty pointed presentations for fleet electrification managers to better understand the availability of incentives and the time it does take to evaluate and the timelines for adopting electric vehicles and the infrastructure to support that as well. But I would say that is in our repertoire to continue to build out those conversations. And we're going to get to another slide here in a minute to see who we have been talking to thus far. But I'm not aware that we've done anything directed towards chambers at this point.
I've got a quick question on the you say highlights, and that's the federal funding and tax credit announcements, and you said a lot of people were holding back to see what that looked like, and you've seen an uptick since final guidance has come out. I think when we issued our order, we were still waiting for those programs to be finalized, and gave some general direction, but I don't know that you know, perhaps you could give me what are the highlights here of now that guidance has come out. How is it merging and is it dovetailing with your programs and making them more viable for customers, or has it provided a separate track that they need to follow one or the other? Can you give me sort of the highlights of how those are working together?
Sure. So I would say it's made it more positive for customers to envision themselves putting in EV infrastructure. You know, the business case, many of them want to, at least at a minimum, workplace, multifamily, recover the cost of putting in the infrastructure. You get the public domain where they actually want to make money, right? So in order to make that business case viable, they really need that support of the federal funding, the tax credits, along with the Evergy incentive to make it a viable option for them. So I think folks were waiting to see how they would all combine together. So what we've been telling folks is that they can stack the Evergy incentive on top of the federal funding. They can't use it to help offset their cost share that's required for them to qualify for that federal funding. But after the fact, once the charging station is in service and they meet all the eligibility requirements, then they could still apply for our incentive to have a little bit of an additional boost to make that business case viable for them.
That's really helpful. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I would further add that we're going to talk a bit more about this. At this point, Commissioner French, you've now foreseen 2 out of our 3 contemporary issues slides. So I'm waiting to see if you can come up with the 3rd one. But we're going to talk more about kind of the role that our rebate plays vis-a-vis these federal programs.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'll try to keep my mouth shut for the next couple slides.
I'm glad we're thinking alike, though, Commissioner French. All right. This slide is just a summary of the underserved counties. In 2021, we had agreed to a definition on what an underserved county looked like, and that was a county in which the ratio of registered electric vehicles to chargers was off balance, right? So for every 10 EVs, we needed to have 25 level 2 charging stations and 150 DC fast chargers. So when we left you in 2021, we had these 18 counties on the left-hand side under 2022. We did not make any changes in 2022. We just went the course with what was originally agreed upon. And then in 2023, when we went back to look at how much new infrastructure had been built and how EV adoption had grown, we went from 18 counties to 27. Some of the counties from 2022 dropped off, and we gained some new ones in 2023. We do envision this to be an ongoing annual review as, as EV adoption grows, infrastructure grows. We see this as being an ebb and flow and a continual change. I don't think 2023 will look the same. 2024 will look the same as 2023. But we wanted to give you a visual of how that has changed and how EV adoption has grown in those counties that we do serve at least one zip code, and there's not infrastructure in place to support that minimum level of EVs.
Wendy, how are you sharing this information? Because I would probably think if I was a county commissioner, city commissioner, city mayor, I would want to know that my county is on this list and what can I do about it?
Sure. As we are having those conversations, we are letting them know that their counties are sitting on this. I am working with the marketing team now to do some very pointed communications and outreach to workplaces, multifamily units, specifically in these underserved counties, trying to get that infrastructure growth to take place where we need it. All right, customer inquiries. So like I said, federal funds have been announced, tax credits. People are seeing that we have incentives available. They're hearing from their other city peers or county peers. So we're talking to a lot of people, not in just one area. We're talking to businesses that want to put in workplace charging. We're talking to property managers that want to put charging in for their multifamily. We're talking to a lot of cities and counties and planning organizations who want to grow charging infrastructure throughout their communities. And then on the right, we are also talking to a lot of customers that are thinking about or have started plans for fleet electrification. So between myself and we have another lead product manager here, we are very busy talking to customers. We spend a lot of time in meetings throughout the week, educating on the incentives that are available, helping them better understand the grants and tax incentives that are available to them, providing information about our time of use rates, educating them on how they can effectively couple those along with our incentives to create a viable business case to support electrification and infrastructure at their workplace or communities or for their fleet. So as you can see, we're talking to people throughout the states, just not here in Johnson County. We're go all the way across to Topeka, Wichita, and what have you. Okay, and then lastly, I'll just wrap up here with some customer awareness and education. So we have done quite a bit this year, and we're seeing some great results. I'll just hit on a couple of the key highlights. The top one is average click-through rates. So for our digital marketing that's taking place online, we're seeing a rate above the industry average. And click-throughs is the number of clicks of somebody seeing our ad. It's a good measurement of customer engagement. So that lets us know they're seeing our ads, they're engaging with us, and perhaps taking the next step towards either going to our website to learn more about the incentives or actually starting an application. Online video completion rates, again, exceeding the industry average. Over a 12-month period, these ads have generated 1.3 million impressions. And an impression is the number of people who may see the ads moving forward regarding our incentives here at Evergy. And then lastly, year over year, start application clicks rose 60%. So from seeing those ads, people who are engaging with us online are going to our web pages and they're hitting start application. So from a commercial perspective, we've created some new case studies, either written case studies or video case studies of real customers who I put in charging infrastructure. We just completed one for the city of Prairie Village, for example. These are very relatable to others who are thinking about electrification. If they can see somebody who's doing it and why they're doing it and the benefits of it, it does help us further that story with other like-minded cities or communities. We've had 110 customers fill out our online form of interest. So what happens, they click a button, they want more information, they're interested, it comes into an email address that we've set up specifically for this purpose. And then we set up 30-minute meetings with these folks to either talk about their project, answer their questions, do any type of education we need to about the rebate or the time of use rates, grants, tax credits, anything that we can help further their customer journey and remove some of the barriers for them to electrify and put in EV charging infrastructure. And then lastly, I'd like to point your attention to some great results we've had with an outreach campaign to promote our clean school bus program. The results of that outreach has given us 7 school districts that have received clean school bus grants, 4 in Kansas, 3 in Missouri, that totaled $2.7 million for 7 buses and the associated chargers. Each bus replaced with electric saves the district $80,000 by offsetting the cost from purchasing a diesel bus. So we're pretty excited about the results of that outreach campaign, and we hope to do additional outreach campaigns such as that. And that's it. Any additional questions?
The Clean School Bus Program, that's federal funding?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
The Clean School Bus Program, is that federal funding?
It is, yes.
Okay, so you're helping connect them to that and promote that program. Okay.
We are, yes.
Thank you.
And in terms of the transit organizations like Topeka Metro and Wichita, there's federal money available too, correct?
Yes, we continue to help them and help, guide them, provide any assistance or support that we can to their projects. And they are on the transit time of use rate, so they do see the benefit of that for their business as well.
Absolutely. Are there any questions from staff or further questions from Commissioner French?
None for me at this point. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you,
All right.
Justin.
Well, thank you, everybody. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Nick.
Okay, so now we're going to hit about the aforementioned contemporary issues. We've got 3 of them. We're going to talk about federal funding. We're going to talk about residential managed charging, which is kind of the next step beyond TOU rates. And then we're going to talk about a new term in the industry, relatively new term, called the North American Charging Standard. Beginning with federal support, we all know we've got the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There are 2 large programs that are specifically targeted towards increasing access to charging out in the public. The first is the National EV Infrastructure Program. It is referred to as NEVI, and this program is building DC fast charge stations, hopefully every 50 miles along our major highway corridors, literally coast to coast. It's a formula funded program. Kansas is going to get about $40 million for that program over 5 fiscal years. Secondly is the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program. This is a nationally competitive grant program that is aimed at increasing the access to charging within our communities. We have a relationship, I would say, with the person that Kansas Department of Transportation hired to kind of head KDOT's efforts with these programs. Our relationship with her, Tammy Alexander is her name, precedes her time at the Kansas Department of Transportation. So what I'm trying to say is we have a very good, very productive working relationship with Tammy and with KDOT by extension. And over the past year or so, we have collaborated with her. We've provided her with kind of our perspective as somebody who's built, a meaningful number of charging stations. So we've been engaged with her a number of times to help her as she kind of reaches critical velocity within KDOT to get these programs up and running. That said, I think one of the key takeaways that I would love the commission to have as we close out this particular contemporary issue is the role of the Evergy programs alongside these federal programs, because what we are seeing is that developer interest is aimed towards the areas where the sites, have the best economics, where the sites have the greatest potential for execution success from their point of view, right? And our TE program, strengthens the application of Kansas sites, because particularly, and that's in both cases, even though the National EV Infrastructure Program is formula funded and Kansas is going to get that money regardless, there's only so many entities that are out there building, owning, and operating these large DC fast charge stations. So we need Kansas applications to be competitive as possible to attract that developer interest. And as true as that is for the NEVI program, it's even more true for the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program, because it's not formula funded. That's a program where Kansas applications are competing alongside Colorado, California, New York State. So we believe that our rebate program provides a critical function for Kansas applicants in both of these cases.
Well, maybe I have another. I'm sorry, Chair, if you want to go first.
Go ahead, Commissioner French. I just wanted to make a comment per the order, but go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to make an observation here of how vital I think this is. And I'm probably skipping ahead to one of your other slides, but we've all seen in the news that there's definitely momentum moving toward the NACS charger type, which would be the Tesla style charger type. And there's definitely a concern that I have that those Tesla supercharger stations seem to dominate the market right now. That I think you mentioned, there's only so many entities providing these DC fast charge along the highway corridors. And as rate regulators, we're obviously concerned when there's an opportunity for one entity to dominate a service category and charge whatever rates it wants, if it's the only game in town. And so while this area has been deregulated, while we wait to see what market develops, I think I'm going to be very interested to see where this funding goes, and to see it would be great if it goes to a diversity of different entity types that can actually provide that competition, at least a bare minimum level of competition to make sure that prices can stay, I don't want to say cost-based, but because we're talking about a deregulated market, but reasonable, within bounds of cost plus a reasonable return. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Nick, but I just think this is going to be absolutely vital that we do get some other competitors in that space.
Yeah, Commissioner French, I would just add a couple of things. One is that it appears a number of the charging station manufacturers are going to be able to incorporate the Tesla standard into their design. So in a matter of months, you're going to see the charge points of this world selling a DC fast charge machine with the Tesla plug on it. What is less clear right now is the extent to which Tesla is going to be involved in the back office with handling payments and things of that nature. And the plug and charge functionality that is such a good such a differentiator with Tesla. Are they going to kind of hold tight to that? Are they going to democratize that as well? That's less clear, but we are certainly, from a hardware standpoint, are going to see a number of non-Tesla entities providing charging stations that have that form factor.
And I also believe, Nick, that our order was clear that we wanted to see if we could get folks out there in the private sector to invest and be a part of. And I think that does take time. And the route that Tesla's taking, I think they've got to realize they're not going to be the only game in town, and they may lose out significantly if they keep their little smokestack thought process. Because I believe what's coming onto the market, more affordable cars, other things are going to leave them in the dust a bit. But I still think we need to see, in terms of the public and private private investment in developing these charging stations. And I would ask, is there anything that you see that other states are doing that we could do more of to try and incent investment?
Well, certainly having the rebate that we have in place was a necessary. I mean, given what has happened on the federal support side since the ruling, I would say that the rebate program we have in place is kind of table stakes, because again, as we are competing, as Kansas applications are competing for charging and fueling infrastructure grant program applications, those applications are going to be including local support, their local utility programs as well. So, we needed to do this, I think, from both of our perspectives, and Kansans are going to benefit from the rebate program. As far as, what are some next steps we could take? There's a conversation being had about the utility side of the meter, and how do we think about line extension policy within the context of charging stations. And, the conversation came under a bright light when we started having school districts that are, seeking out electric buses, right? And a school district that is in an area where the grid is less robust versus one where it's more robust. And should the school district that just so happens to be located where it's less robust, should they be financially burdened with, the grid upgrades according to our current, accepted practices, versus the one that happens to be located in an area where the grid is robust and they basically, get the new capacity for no charge? That's a conversation utilities and regulators are having increasingly around the country.
And I think that's also come into the education arena as to whether some federal funding should be provided to the more rural areas where that would actually then support the change, and that dollars may be coming in that and more in the education side to support that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be great if it did. And I think it's something we should take note of as we look at the fleet of buses everywhere you see opportunity. Mm-hmm. Okay. Justin, do you have any questions or comments at this point? Okay, hearing none.
Oh, ma'am, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Nick.
Okay, residential managed charging. This is a type of program that some states that, some utilities are already piloting. We certainly have an eye on it, as I alluded to earlier. And basically, residential managed charging is kind of the next step beyond time of use rates. And in residential managed charging, the utility is taking a more active role in determining when a given car charges during the 12 hours that it's plugged into every night, right? And I put together kind of an example framework on the bottom right-hand side of this slide, beginning with the fact that, RMC exists or is enabled by level 2. You can't do residential managed charging. It's unfeasible on level 1 because you need that car to only need to be charging maybe 1-2 hours a night, maybe 3 hours, right? And level 2 charging, 3 hours will get you almost 100 miles. So that covers the vast majority of drivers. So the question is, where does that 3 hour time frame, 1 to 3 hour time frame occur during the 12 hours that it's plugged into? In a residential managed charging program, the utility controls that. They control that based on an algorithm that can be fairly simple or can be fairly complicated and incorporate things like what is the real-time carbon intensity of the generation mix, right? So it can make its charging decisions based on a number of factors related to grid conditions and generation mix. I would say we're monitoring this very closely. We actually did a study. We did an industry canvas of what our peers are doing fourth quarter of last year, and we continue to monitor it. The technologies that are involved here it's still quite dynamic, and we are, I would say, in a phase of monitor, waiting for things to settle down so that when we come to you with a proposed solution for residential managed charging, we have confidence that it's durable. In other words, what we don't want is we don't want a program, go through the whole process of getting it approved, commission approved, and then have technology leave us in the dust a year or two from now and us trying to pivot to something else. So we're waiting for this innovation in this space to decelerate, let's say. Any questions on residential managed charging?
I think this is a really great slide, and this is the kind of thing that from my individual perspective, you ought to be a fast follower on these things, because it almost looks like an air conditioner cycling program where we're going to let you use it when the conditions are right and most advantageous to the grid, and to reduce overall cost to all the customer base as a whole. But within that customer need of, for example, you've got here that the car's got an 80% charge every day at 6 a.m. So the customer's still getting the thing they need. But you're gonna provide services based on those inputs. I think that's a really good way to start. Obviously, you've got things like vehicle to grid as a later concept, which is going to be a little more like a distributed generation type of asset, and that's really intriguing as well. But I think this may be more of a low-hanging fruit, a good first thing to implement. So I would be very interested as you're monitoring some of the early pilots going on, as you start to get results and think it may be feasible in your service territories. I'd be very interested to hear updates on timing of when you may think this could be implementable.
Sure.
So essentially you're looking at going from charging to smart charging, and that the technology exists where you can actually make the differential between just plugging in and really fine tuning it so that it is to the best benefit of the grid.
That's right. Yes. The customer is essentially they're setting the guardrails, right? Like, yep. I need my car every morning in this state. I'm going to plug in every night, 5, 6 p.m. I don't care how it gets there. Utility, that's your problem. Just when I get up and I get in that car, it better be at 80%, right, by 6 a.m.
I think that I would agree with Commissioner French. This makes a lot of sense to me. And you're saying that perhaps you're going to wait until we get something durable on this smart charging. So your time frame, are we looking at 6 months, a year? Are you proposing some pilots? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, I would say what I would hope is that we would be able to put forward a proposal for a program that we believe is a durable solution, 2025 timeframe.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Further questions or comments to Nick on the residential managed charging?
I didn't include a date in that dash box intentionally, and then you got a date out of me anyway. So,
well, to me, that's that. I mean, you're saying you're waiting. Well, are we like short-term waiting, or is it like standing in line and thinking this is forever? I think too, your customers will be pressing you as well. I mean, because I think they get it. The guardrails are there, and for those who have moved to EVs, I think they do have a different mindset about how this is going to work, and perhaps more open-minded about potential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Further questions, comments?
Yeah, I've just got a technological question. So if I already have a level 2 charger today, is this technology going to be just an add-on to that level 2 charger, or am I going to have to get a whole new charging set, so to speak, for you to manage the charging?
The industry and utilities are all kind of collectively moving, with all due respect to ChargePoint and folks who make residential Wi-Fi chargers. Industry is moving towards utilizing the onboard capabilities of the vehicle. And that's a lot of words to say that these programs are being implemented via communication between the utility and the vehicle proper, with no in between.
Okay.
Older vehicles don't have the capabilities. They're telematics is what it's called, right? Onboard telematics. Older vehicles don't have those capabilities. So what you see is some utilities are piloting a program that, is open to folks who have that Wi-Fi enabled smart charger, or folks who just want to use telematics on their car because they realize not every car is there. The older cars can't do the telematics solution. But overwhelmingly, the utilities are rallying around telematics based solutions because it's just one less thing to break, right? And just one less thing to communicate with, by taking out that smart charger from the middle of that communication stream.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And I think it's getting in the weeds, but is what you're saying, Nick, that if I've got a Tesla, for example, that has, the car is the charger, essentially, it's got the telematics.
Yep.
That I would download some sort of Evergy application into their system, and that is the mechanism by which you would be controlling it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
There would be a smart app that you would set up your guardrails and all that. But kind of under the hood, the technology implementer that we would hire would be using Tesla APIs, I think, to do all the communications with the cars. And actually, Tesla's is one of the easiest OEMs to do a program like this with, because they've been so open with their sharing their telematics data, of course, with the owner's permission, right?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I kind of had the same question. Jeff really laid it out well, of just exactly how this is going to happen, through the existing meter and everything, but that makes a lot of sense.
I do think, and Nick, this is more not towards this particular facet, but dealing with the apartment dwellers, multi housing, how the charging is actually going to work, and especially as I look at young people and they want to perhaps be adopters. They don't own a home, they live in an apartment, that's the way they are. And as I look at new apartments being built, especially like in Johnson County and some other areas, whether they're figuring how charging is actually going to work in their complex. I still do not understand if there is a clear way of getting that done. A pathway, is there?
Yeah, I would say that our communications with multifamily developers have been mixed as far as their it's a future investment, right? And that's not necessarily top of mind for some of these developers as they build, new multifamily housing, because that it could come at a significant expense, right? Depending on how far they want to take it. So we've spoken with developers who are very much wanting to kind of future-proof their development, their apartment complex. And we've also spoken with developers that are like, that's 10 years from now stuff. They can figure that out. That's somebody else's problem, right? It's not ours.
I think in the Kansas City metro area, perhaps the mindset is a little bit different, maybe, as I do think questions are coming up in existing complexes. How can you provide the energy for the ability for us to charge at night?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, okay, any other questions? All right, moving on.
I would note we are at time. I don't know if you guys have a few minutes to hold on, or is that even a thing? Do we have?
I believe. Pardon?
I don't have a hard stop.
I do not either, so proceed.
Okay. All right. So now the NACS. This is in case you missed it, but clearly y'all have not missed it, that one, there was a charging standard war going on. Hardly anybody knew about that. And two, Tesla won it. Industry had, going into this year, Tesla aside, basically stacked hands and said, the CCS connector, which is the one that's kind of faded out on the right, that's the standard. We're going to write the technical requirements for the federal money around that standard. Everybody, 1, 2, 3, break, and away we went. And then last month, within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, GM and Ford announced that basically conversations were being had at top levels. And I say that because GM and Ford had signed on to these agreements that CCS was going to be the standard, right? Well, lo and behold, these top level negotiations were going on, and everybody pivoted dramatically, really, to the Tesla plug. And I would say the Tesla plug's on the left-hand side here. It's darker. It's better. All right. It is better. It is going to be a better experience for folks. Ultimately, there may be some growing pains as we as other automakers implement this plug-in, but it's smaller, it's easier to work with. It's going to be a better long-term solution. What I would say, and what I want to make clear today is, one question could be, well, how does that affect the clean charge network? And that question is really, the top right photo on this slide addresses that question. And what you see is essentially a charge point charger, and that person is plugging in a little adapter. It's probably about 3.5 inches long, and they're fixing to plug that into their Tesla, right? So all they need is that adapter. Click it in, boom, they can use the clean charge network. In the future, 2025 on, when Ford and GM and everybody else, because when Ford and GM, when they decided to go Tesla, that makes it the de facto standard. Everybody else is just getting in line now. So 2025 on, everybody will be having these adapters and they can use the clean charge network. It doesn't affect operation at all. You get the same speed and reliability. Any questions about the pivot towards the North American charging standard?
I guess just for future installs, do you plan to move toward the NACS plugs?
You mean for clean charge network? Yeah, I would say firstly that we don't currently have a vision for future installs, but if we were to install new clean charge network stations, that's a decision to make. I personally, as I say here, I'd probably install, the NACS version. I think that'd be a good move.
Yeah, and people could still, if they've got the other type on their car, they could still use an adapter back to the CCS, I guess.
That's right. They can. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anybody else? Justin, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question for me. So the adapter, is this the sort of thing that Evergy envisions individual car owners owning and having, or is there one that's semi-permanent or on place at the Clean Charge Network site?
Yeah, so for the level 2 adapter, I would expect that car owners, it would not surprise me if Ford and GM started shipping their cars with this little widget, right? If not, people can buy one off Amazon for $70 or whatever. But I would anticipate that the car owners would have one rolling around in their glove box rather than us having one kind of resident at the level 2 charging stations.
Okay. So if they don't already have one, then they would, another potential is they could just bypass the Clean Charging Network and go to a Tesla supercharging station, right?
Yeah, they could. And the current state of play is that Tesla owners are the only ones that are doing this, right? Because Teslas are the only vehicles that are being shipped with this port. And every Tesla owner has this adapter. It comes with their car. So Tesla owners are quite adept with using it. And in the future, Ford and GM and other automakers, other owners will be just as adept at using that when they run into a CCS charging station.
But Nick, I assume this is a temporary problem, right? over
Yeah.
the next few years, cars will all be made, hopefully we'll be moving to one standard. Charging stations will all be on that same standard. And so 10 or 15 years down the line, unless you've got a really old car, you're going to have, everybody's going to be using the one standards, right? So this is something over the next few years as you're dealing with some legacy equipment, right?
Yeah, we're on the glide path now that converges at the single max standard being for everybody. But it's going to take a number of years to get there, because there are, several 100,000 vehicles out there that have CCS. And in fact, Ford and GM themselves are going to be shipping vehicles with the CCS until 2025 model year.
Yeah, the NACS, does ChargePoint make a commercial NACS capable charger today?
They're not shipping one yet, but they have announced their intent to ship one. Justin, it's next year. I mean, no later than 2024, maybe even by the end of this year, they'll be shipping the NACS version of their DC fast charge machine.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Nick, do you have anything else to share?
Just real quick, some milestones between now and the next time we get together in June of 2024 that I wanted to highlight for y'all. First is that we have an evaluation, measurement, and verification process associated with our residential with our residential rebate program, wherein we are going to be analyzing the behaviors of the various participants. Draft report is going to come out by the end of this year. Second thing that I would highlight for folks is that we owe y'all a paper on AMI data disaggregation. We are going to submit that coincident with the year 2 compliance report by the end of April next year. We also have a future rate designs for EV charging. We're calling it a presentation that we've agreed to provide in June. And I think that is an opportunity to talk about, obviously, what it says, future rate designs, but it's also an opportunity to update y'all on the latest related to residential managed charging, which I heard there's an appetite for that. So there's a calendar entry for that we can use to provide that specific information.
Anybody want to comment? So this will come after the rate case.
Yes.
Any comment, Commissioner French, or final questions?
No, thank you. And I mean, thank you for the presentation. And this is a very helpful timeline of what we can expect in the future. And I mean, again, I absolutely, you're right to pick up that I would support an update on some of these items, and hopefully a material update with, by mid next year, hopefully we've got some concrete ideas of where we may be going. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate seeing sort of what we can expect.
Absolutely.
Nick, I would like to just offer that as we look at the map of the United States, I hope we don't see Kansas as this off color, because we've got Colorado here and Missouri here, and I think there's some early adopters in both of those states that we just have not seen in Kansas. So I hope that there's no excuses for us moving forward. And I appreciate your coordination with KDOT. That is critical. That's critical to the success of their program, and that you guys are working hand in glove. Further, the education communication component is so important as you talk to city managers, city commissioners, county commissioners, school district, school boards, and others who control the purse strings and the wealth and benefit of their community. It's so important that they feel engaged and that you're bringing them up to speed on what is going on, whether it's, you take the metro area in Kansas City versus an Emporia, Manhattan, wherever, outskirts of Wichita, that they feel they've been shared with and that there's opportunities. So I know that's the hard part. That's the person-to-person part, but I appreciate the efforts you're making and your online communication to folks trying to get their attention. And it's so hard when everybody's vying for that person's attention. Thank you and your staff. I appreciate your time. I appreciate this report. And if there's no other thoughts or communication by Commissioner French, not seeing any, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Duffy.